Is this the dagger?
G'day guys, JB here coming at you with another review, and having had a couple of weeks worth of games to play now, pre and post All-Star game, I figure it's about time to get a review out and get a bit of coverage on what's been happening on the league. Obviously had about a week break with the All-Star game, and I covered a little bit of that and a bit of a wrap on how teams looked to the All-Star break, but this time a little bit more of how they have played over that period. So we'll cover from the 10th of February through to March the 1st. We'll have a look at each team, the wins, the losses, the performers, and just where I think they're going to sit and try and position themselves now as we genuinely look into the future and take a look at how they will be throughout March and certainly heading into the business end of April. So without further ado, let's get into the East, and let's get into it to March 1st of the 23-24 NBA season, starting with Atlanta. 3-4 on the period there, 26-33 on the season. Wins against Houston, Orlando and Utah. Lost out to Chicago, Charlotte, Toronto and Brooklyn. Dejounte Murray, their best player, 22.6 points, 6.7 rebounds, 7.6 assists, 1.3 steals and 0.6 blocks. 47.6 from the field, 27.3 from deep and 74.3 from the free throw line. Ultimately now for Atlanta, they're going to try and push towards 500. They're going to try and really be a serious worry when it comes to the play-in tournament. That's about all they've got in them. Beyond that, it's them and Chicago battling. And they'll be going right uphill, considering that you're likely going to see them contend against New York, Philadelphia, Indiana, Orlando, and Miami to really try and compete not only for that final position there in the playoffs, but you just don't know who you're going to be competing with in the play-in tournament. It's going to depend on how they all play. Boston, a dominant week. 7-0 over that period there. They're 47-12 on the season, making a really big run. This is a 60-win team. This is a serious championship contender. Defeated everyone in their path, as I mentioned there, including Brooklyn twice, Miami, Chicago, New York, Philadelphia, and Dallas. Jason Tatum leading the way. He's been their best player all year. 27.4 points, 9 rebounds, 6.4 assists, 1 steal, 0.7 blocks, 2.3 turnovers. So efficient with the basketball. 49.6 from the field, 37.9 from deep, 88.4 from the free throw line. Boston, they're just chugging along. They're the first team to secure the first team that's absolutely secured postseason success. I don't believe they can fall any lower than 6th if they were to lose all their games from here on in the East. Genuine championship contender, the absolute standard bearer of the league right now, and based on how everything's looking, the genuine option for coming out of the East and certainly winning it all, likely to contend with Denver. Brooklyn 3-5 over this period, 23-36 on the season. Wins against San Antonio, Memphis and Atlanta. Lost out twice to Boston as well as Toronto, Minnesota and Orlando. When your best player is shooting under 40% from the field, under 30% from deep, you're in a lot of trouble. Mikal Bridges, the sore thumb on a badly broken hand, so to speak. 14.6 points, 4.3 rebounds, 3.5 assists, 1 steal and 0.3 blocks. Limited turnovers, but limited makes as well, as I mentioned. For 37.6 from the field, 26.6 from deep, 75% from the free throw line. With Cam Thomas appearing to have some issues with Brooklyn as well, you can't imagine this team's going to look the same for very long. Unfortunately for Brooklyn, they've tried twice to really vamp up that franchise. They tried to do it with Garnett and Pierce and Deron Williams. They've then since tried it with Kevin Durant, with Kyrie Irving, James Harden. No success whatsoever, and I have a feeling they're just going to try and blow it up. Just when I thought they may need one or two pieces, they're going to need to try and make an entire new jigsaw puzzle. A nice handy week for Charlotte, 5-4 over that period there, 15-45 on the season. Defeated Memphis, Indiana, Atlanta, Utah and Portland. Lost to Milwaukee twice as well as Philadelphia and Golden State. Miles Bridges, their best player in that period, 20.4 points, 8.9 rebounds, 3.2 assists, 1.2 steals, 0.3 blocks on 2.4 turnovers, 48.7 from the field, 41.1 from deep, 75% from the free throw line. Charlotte clearly standing above Detroit and Washington now, but the question is, how long is it going to take for them to fully buy in? You've got Brandon Miller, you've got Miles Bridges, you've got LaMelo Ball. You know, there's some pieces there to really try and build a team that can get towards 500 if they're healthy, if they're able to commit, if they're able to continue. But the big issue there, you're talking about a team that's 30 games below 500. I mean, it's a real issue when you look at it there for a team that's got a lot of talent but just doesn't play any defence. And especially when you can still got talks about Miles Bridges moving on. You're not sure about the health of LaMelo Ball. Brandon Miller clearly trying to step up where he can, but he's going to have to do that a lot sooner than expected. Charlotte, a nice little run there, but nothing special on the season. Chicago 3-5 on the week, 38-32 on the season, defeated Atlanta, New Orleans and Cleveland. They did lose out in a return to Cleveland, also lost out to Boston, Detroit, Milwaukee and Orlando. DeMar DeRozan, he's just ticked over 23,000 career points, one of 35 players to ever do it, and I believe one of only 6 active players to have achieved the feat. 24.5 points, 4.5 rebounds, 5.6 assists, 0.3 steals and 0.3 blocks. But I've got to say, when you're committing less than a turnover a game, I can excuse some of the slumps on the shooting spread there. 45.8 from the field, that's just below where I'd like to see it. 28.6 from deep, not ideal. Never a known three-point shooter. And 88.2 from the free throw line, at least he's trying to convert. I think the upside for Chicago right now is they are a better team when there's now no issues with Zach LaVine. You can see the positives of DeRozan being a veteran. You can see the positives of Andre Drummond and Nikola Vucevic as a tandem. You can see the positive that is Kobe White, and certainly he's going to be up there for most improved. You can really see the positives of an Alex Caruso there. So Chicago, they're 4 games below 500. They're in a better position than Atlanta. They're going to be the 9th seed, you would think. Whether they can get above 500 and really try and push to be more of a common sense selection in the playing team is going to be their real question there. But some really nice effort from 5 or 6 of their lead guys. They just don't have the same firepower as other teams. As simple as that. Cleveland 5-4 on the week, 39-20 on the season. Defeated Toronto, Chicago, Washington, Dallas and Detroit. They did lose out to Philadelphia twice, as well as Orlando and the Bulls there in a return game. Evan Mobley, he's been back in the team for a couple of weeks now. Even Darius Garland really trying to carry some of the load in replace of Donovan Mitchell, try and keep this team relevant, really try and build more into the rotation, so to speak. And I think they've really shown they're a genuine second, third round team with the way they've been playing. Mobley himself, really nice as well. 16.3 points, 10.3 rebounds, 3.1 assists, 1.1 steals, 2.1 blocks, less than 2 turnovers, efficient from the field at 58.4 overall on the floor. Not great from the line at 58.1 and less to be desired from deep at 25%. But if you've got a guy who's come back in after 7 or 8 weeks and he's already back to all defensive form and he's able to somewhat shoulder a bit of the load without a Donovan Mitchell or a Jared Allen on the team, things are starting to look really good for Cleveland. You know, they're a side that's now a genuine second round team. I don't think anyone's going to question that right now. They've really stepped up. Donovan Mitchell's really stepped up. It's going to be that playoff run that does make a question for Donovan Mitchell. It's also going to be a question of, hey, are we potentially going to run into Philadelphia as a 7th seed? Interesting times there, particularly if Joel Embiid gets back. But Cleveland working really nicely. Mobley back in, back to all defensive level play, back to all NBA level play. Really, I mean, if you're going to be putting those kind of defensive numbers up, consistent on the offensive end of the floor, you know, a genuine top 15 candidate in the league. So a really nice return for him. Detroit, a little pressure off them. They're officially the second worst team in the NBA. 1-7 over that period. They're 9-50 on the season. 9-50. That is absolutely ridiculous. Defeated Chicago, lost out to the Clippers, the Lakers, the Suns, the Pacers, the Magic, the Knicks and the Cavs. Cade Cunningham, a nice little run there. 22.8 points, 5.3 rebounds, 7.5 assists, 0.5 steals, 0.8 blocks, less than 3 turnovers. Reasonable scoring as well. 49.3 from the field, 45.1 from deep, 85.3 from the free throw line. The second worst team in the NBA. And geez, the fact that a team has managed to surpass them when it didn't look like Detroit were going to win much at all. A 28-game losing streak amongst all of that. Even if you get 2 or 3, you make that record look a bit more respectable. Clearly the second worst team in the league. And I tell you what, Washington really fighting that battle out there with Detroit, for who overall is the worst team to ever play in the NBA. Cunningham, he's improved throughout the season. The end of the day, he's going to get numbers. Just a matter of those being effective. Indiana 5-3 on the week, 34-27. So they're trying to really stamp their claim to get, you know, right in amongst those top 6 seeds in the East, battling with New York, battling with Miami, battling with Orlando to try and get those that 6th seed there. That's going to be a really nice matchup and a lot of intercrossing there of all their fixtures as the season progresses. As I mentioned, 5-3 over this period. Defeated New York, Toronto, Detroit, Dallas and New Orleans. Lost a return game to Toronto and New Orleans and Charlotte. And their best player over the period, now again, you've got to remember when I do all of these, and I've said this all year, but I may as well put the reminder in, best player over that period there has also played those games. So for me, it's clear Pascal Siakam over those 8 games, and he's played in all 8 games, gets the nod. 19.4 points, 6.4 rebounds, 4 assists, 0.8 steals, 0.5 blocks, less than a turnover a game, and an efficient clip from the field at 53.8%. Around 35% from deep, 34.5 to be exact, so could be a little better, and certainly could be better from the stripe. And I think this is the key for Indiana here. They've really got to harness the fact that you've got Tyrese Halliburton, who's really pushing the MVP conversation, the top 10 players in the league conversation, and you've got Pascal Siakam, who, if we're going to be honest with ourselves, probably should have been an all-star this year. The fact he got traded is ultimately the reason he wasn't an all-star. It's going to hurt him in any particular MVP candidacies there, Siakam. It's also going to hurt him in any particular conversation when it pertains to All-NBA. But when you're talking about a former All-Star, former All-NBA selection, teaming up with arguably the best pure point guard in the NBA right now, you are going to get some results. And that's exactly what Indiana wanted. Genuine talk about a Paul George reunion in the off-season. I don't know about that. They need to focus on the now, and right now they need to focus on being a top 6 seed in the East. I think ultimately it's going to be New York, Miami, Indiana, and Orlando, along with Philadelphia, trying to fight it out really from the 4th seed, 5th seed, 6th seed, 7th seed, and 8th seed. You will not see Chicago and Atlanta get in that mix there. Speaking of Miami, 5-2 on that period there, 33-26 wins against Milwaukee, Philadelphia, New Orleans, Sacramento, and Portland. Lost out to the Celtics and the Nuggets. No shock that they would not get the job done against, for me, the 2 finals leaders. Bam Adebayo, it's been his team all year. It continues to be his team. 21.1 points, 10.3 rebounds, 4.6 assists, 1.4 steals and 1 block a game. 3 turnovers. You know, I'd like to see a little bit more production for him if he's going to be getting those levels of turnovers, but I know that Bam is committed on the other end of the floor. It's a bit different when you know you've got that commitment on the opposite side of the ball versus guys who don't. 54.1 from the field, hasn't made a 3-pointer, and 81.8 from the free throw line in Miami. They've done this all year, but the problem is they're doing it the way that Chicago should have done it. And that's not only this year, but that's last year as well for the Bulls. I mean, you would see a period where they'd win 2 games and then they'd lose 3. They'd win 3 games, then, you know, they just really get stifled on their runs. But you look at Miami, they're having up and down months. They're having a run there where it's like, geez, for the month we've played 13 games and we've gone 10-3, or 13 games and we've gone 13, or, you know, we've gone 12-4. Had a really nice month, and then all of a sudden they barely break 500. So it's just getting that consistency there, Miami. We know they're a team that likes pressure. We know they're a team that can deliver when it matters. They are going to look to disrupt a lot of people. They're continuing to do that disruption now. Good to see, as I said, Bam playing well. Jimmy Butler's had moments here or there as well. He's been dealing with some stuff. But, yeah, Miami competitive, above 500. Bam having a really nice season. And he's probably started to really make his case right now, Bam, for that All-NBA third team. I mean, I know they don't select it on positions anymore, but just with Embiid being out for that period of time, Bam having a genuine run towards All-NBA selection again this season. Milwaukee, 6-2 over the period, 40-21 on the season. Just missed out on that 40/20 rule. Defeated Denver, Minnesota, Philadelphia, twice beat Charlotte, and defeated Chicago. Lost out to Miami and Memphis. Giannis just continuing to be Giannis and had a massive 8-game period there. 31.4 points, 11.5 rebounds, 6.4 assists. 30, 12, and 6 has just been routine for Giannis for the last 3 years. 0.6 steals, 0.8 blocks, less than 3 turnovers, but it's this kind of conversion. 69.4 from the field, 72.7 from deep, and 68.7 from the free throw line. The big question here for Milwaukee, can they string some wins together? Can they build some chemistry? Can they get back over Cleveland? Can they put some pressure back on the 2 top teams in the Eastern Conference? I don't think anyone's got any question that your 3 in the East is pretty much set at this point. You're going to see home court advantage at least through the first round of those 3 teams. Second round is going to be your next question. Can Milwaukee get over Cleveland? Can they deal with some of their in-house issues? Can they deal with some of the chemistry issues? Can they deal with some of the worries and concerns of their star players? Ultimately, you do need to start putting a lot of pressure on Giannis here as the leader. It's all well and good to front the camera and be the nice guy and be jovial, but you do have to crack the whip and you do have to get the job done. It's something that Giannis really needs to do now as the leader of this team. Continue to push, really build the team together, bring them as a unit, and really get them to deliver where they can. You've still got a nice championship core remaining. You've still got one of the best clutch players, one of the best players in general the league's seen for the last decade. At this point, you need to put up, you need to shut up, you need to get the business, and you need to get the job done and make it feel like everyone has made the right decision to stay on board. New York, after having a really nice run following the turn of the year, really nice through January, just before the All-Star break, really have had a bit of a slump and still in that at the moment. 2-6 over that period. Still 10 games above 500 though, so you're going to still see them as a playoff team unless they just fall off the proverbial mountain. Defeated Philadelphia and Detroit, lost out to Indiana, Houston, Orlando, Boston, New Orleans, and Golden State. Josh Hart, their best player through this period, and I think that probably speaks volumes that Josh Hart has played all 8 games and has been the best player through all of them. 13.9 points, 10 rebounds, 4.9 assists, or 1.4 steals and 0.3 blocks. Less than 2 turnovers, but not efficient anywhere in sight. I don't mind being close to 36% from deep, but 43.3 from the field and 59.1 from the free throw line does ruin it. Randall's injured. That's going to be interesting. There's going to be some chemistry building with some of their trade-ins. There's no doubt about it. And Jalen Brunson, going to have to get back on that bike and ride. He's just fallen outside of my top 10 in the MVP voting. But for New York, they've got a lot of work to do still. This is a team that wants to secure top 4. This is a team that's going to need to do that, competing with Indiana, with Philadelphia, with Orlando, and with Miami. That is a huge cluster of 5 teams that ultimately right now is going to decide exactly the fortunes of this postseason, and just see how effective it really is for a team to all of a sudden start being, we're a 2nd or a 3rd seed. We got a really tough 6th seed matchup. We're playing Miami, we're playing Indiana, we're playing Philadelphia. The last thing New York want to be doing is sitting there as a 4th or a 5th seed, trying to work out, am I going to have a slight home court advantage? Am I going to be running into someone? They're going to have a tough matchup first round. They're going to need to be healthy. They're going to need to get the job done. Really interesting times for the Knicks, particularly through the month of March, and at least the first couple of weeks to set the tone heading into the end of the season. For Orlando, they're 6-2 over this period, 34-26 on the season, so jumping back up closer to 10 games above 500. Defeated Chicago, New York, Cleveland, Detroit, Brooklyn, and Utah. Lost out to the Thunder and the Hawks. Franz Wagner playing in all 8 games. 19.3 points, 4.8 rebounds, 4.5 assists, 0.9 steals, 0.5 blocks. Less than 3 turnovers at 2.6. Greater than 50% from the field at 50.4. Greater than 80% of the line at 83.3. 25.6% from deep. And Wagner is showing to be this guy that, I can be the number 1, but I'm also a really solid number 2 who can come in and take the reins when need be, when something needs to be done. And that's exactly the role that he needs to keep playing with Orlando. There's no doubt that it's Banchero's team. There's no qualms about how this team looks. When they've got their chemistry going, they're a tough team offensively, and defensively they're one of the best drilled, well-coached teams in the association, and that's why they're still sitting 8 games above 500. Everyone thought, they're going to take a tumble, they're going to be on a bit of struggle street. You got to remember, this team has been a 500 team since about the 20-game mark last season. They're still doing it. They're now going to push towards the playoffs. They're a younger team, so if they're going to get a 7th or an 8th seed, that's great. 2nd year in with Paolo Banchero and the whole squad you've got. Really good signs there for Orlando, but they do need to stick fat. They do need to be solid. They need to take a little bit out of where they can, saying, hey, we've beat New York. Hey, we've beat Cleveland. We're the team that deserves to be in the 6. We've beat Chicago. We know we can win a playing game. So really need to build some of that, just that mental strength coming from those victories. Try and build some momentum. Philadelphia, 4-4 on the week. They sit 9 games above 500. Defeated Washington, Charlotte, and twice against Cleveland, but lost to Miami, New York, Milwaukee, and Boston. Tyrese Maxey, their best player, 28.5 points, 5.5 rebounds, 6.3 assists, 0.9 steals, and 0.3 blocks. There's a reason this man was on the precipice, was certainly selected as an all-star this year. There's a reason why he's been one of the best second options, and the reason he's taken this huge step in development and growth and been crucial for Philadelphia, and the reason that someone like a Buddy Hield and someone like a Kyle Lowry can come in there and still get in the flow of their game, and someone like a Tobias Harris still getting it done as well. 0.9 steals, 0.3 blocks, less than 2 turnovers. It is just getting it right from the field at 44.4%, because 38.5% from deep, 92.5% from the line is not something anyone is going to whinge about. I suppose the question for Philadelphia, how do they look when Embiid comes back? How long is he going to be back for? Is he going to get 4 weeks under his belt before playoffs? Is he only going to get a couple of weeks under his belt? That'll be a real touch and go situation. It'll be a really interesting proposition for Philadelphia. You're potentially going to look at this team as a 7th seed who may match up in the second round against Cleveland, or in the first round against Cleveland, say, and win it. And then all of a sudden your playoffs are thrown a spanner in the works once again. So, they always talk about a lower seed having an advantage and things of that nature. Being a lower seed and an advantage with a guy who's been averaging 36, 12 and 6 with 2 blocks is a lot different than taking on a stacked 6th seed because they've got heart and they've got grit. Philadelphia could be a really tough low seed here in the Eastern Conference. Could cause some issues, especially when you've got the firepower of a Buddy Hield, of a Tyrese Maxey, and a bit of veteran savvy as well with Kyle Lowry. But Philadelphia, they've only got to stay thereabout and really try and remain competitive. Toronto 3-5 on the week. No good news coming out of their most recent game. 22-38 on the season. Defeated Brooklyn, Atlanta and Indiana. Lost out to Cleveland, the Spurs. A return against Indiana, Dallas and Golden State. Scotty Barnes with an okay week. 18.5 points, 9.6 rebounds, 7.8 assists, 1.4 steals and 1.4 blocks. Again, you're talking about one of the best two-way players on the planet and certainly one of the leading all-league defenders that we've got. 3.5 turnovers, 48% from the field, 82.1 from the free throw line. I don't like 17.9 from the three-point line, and I certainly don't like the idea that he now has an injury. I don't recall whether it's his face or whether it's his hand, but he's going to be in a bit of trouble. He's got some issues there that he's going to have to deal with. Toronto are going to have to work very hard to get through it. I don't see them putting up too much resistance, but I do know that they are going to have to bust their tail, and they have a mountain of work to do if they are going to overcome that. Good luck to Scotty Barnes. I mean, he made an all-star selection this year. I probably wouldn't have had him as an all-star selection, but he's certainly one of the more improved players, certainly a cornerstone there in Toronto. And if they can get just 1 or 2 pieces there, try and get back into a playoff contention, really work it out, try and get a growth stage there, and then all of a sudden you have a different team on your hands. Finally, over to Washington. They lost all their games. They haven't won since January 29th, and Jordan Poole off the bench has been their best player, shooting less than 40% from the field. They're 9 from 51. They're the worst team in basketball. They are an absolute joke. Really simple stuff. We'll head over to the top 10 in the East. Things are just starting to get a little bit exciting, of course, as we look at things there. Celtics at number 1. They are clear-cut number 1. They're going to be there for a while. Cleveland at number 2 with the Bucks at number 3. This is where the Bucks need to start making a move, need to start applying some pressure here in the early part of March. For New York, as I mentioned, New York, Philadelphia, Orlando, Miami and Indiana are just going to be juggling spots, I think, between now and the end of the year. If you are a top 3 team, you are not wanting to see the Sixers in the first round if they are healthy. That becomes a matchup nightmare. That becomes very interesting, but you've got to remember it is also pertinent on the health of Joel Embiid. So, that 4 through 8 spot is a really tough race, a really tight race, and that's something I think a lot of fans need to be paying attention to, particularly for the fact that you're going to see these teams battle it out to try and get seeding, and they're probably going to cost your favourite player or your favourite team too. So you need to pay attention to that one. The Bulls and the Hawks, I don't going to see anything beyond the 9th seed and the 10th seed for them. Honestly, if they're not at 500, as we all know, or particularly anyone who follows my channel and knows my opinion on this, they personally, for me, wouldn't deserve to even be in the playoffs. But, really nice look at how the Eastern Conference hit so far. Player of the week, Jason Tatum. Boston was 7-0, had a nice run, had a bit of a whinge, had a bit of a sook about not being in the MVP conversation. At the end of the day, I think Jason Tatum's going to be very, very happy to have a nice, productive year, an all-NBA level year with one of, if not the best roster that he's had for his career, and walk out with a championship. Individuals and MVPs aside, that is what that guy is going to want. That is what he and Boston needs to re-establish themselves back at the top of the pile here in the NBA. So a really, really nice run to the East there. Over to the West. For Dallas, they were 5-3 over the period, 34-26 on the year. Defeated OKC, Washington, the Spurs, the Suns and the Raptors. Lost out to the Pacers, the Cavs and the Celtics, and a massive run by Luka Doncic. 33.9 points, 9.4 rebounds, 11.4 assists. Just a casual 34, 9 and 11 for Luka over that 8-game period, and I believe something silly like 32, 10 and 32, 16 and 16 over his last 15 games. Just a genuine beast with the ball in hand, 1.5 steals, 0.6 blocks a game, 3.4 turnovers, and efficient splits. He's managed to get above 50% from the field. He's 38% plus from deep, 81% plus from the free throw line. The only question here defensively now for Dallas, Daniel Gafford. I've mentioned this a couple of times now, but he is a huge get for them, an underrated interior defender. PJ Washington, a nice piece as well. At the end of the day, they're going to need to get wins. This is a team that's going to be right amongst the playing teams if they're not careful. And it's that battle. It's 5 through 8 over in the West, and even through to 9 and 10 when you've got 500 teams, where things become really interesting and certainly become watching. Dallas, they're going to need to be on their toes, because if they start dropping games and they start slipping, they are in some very serious trouble. Because this is a Dallas team that would not want to face an informed Golden State, an informed Los Angeles, an informed Sacramento, an informed Phoenix. That is the sort of thing that they very well could run into in a playing tournament. And then in the first round, they will not want to see any of the top 3, let alone top 4 in the conference there. So a fair bit of work to do for Dallas, but they're sitting in a good spot. Denver 5-2, 41-19 on the year. They beat the 40/20 mark. Defeated Washington, Portland, Golden State, Sacramento, and Miami. Lost out to Milwaukee in the return game against Sacramento. For Jokic, a quietly beasting period there that fortnight. 22.6 points, 13.1 rebounds, 11.3 assists, 1.6 steals, and 0.9 blocks. Less than 2.5, or just over 2.5 turnovers a game. Shooting splits of 55.6 from the field, 82.1 from the free throw line, 21.7 from three-point land. This will be the period where you'll see Denver try and kick it into gear. This is a team that's going to look and go, well, hey, we really need a guy who's going to be able to pinch hit because Jamal Murray's having a down period. Hey, Michael Porter Jr., what are you doing? Or, geez, Aaron Gordon, we really need you to step up. Or, Reggie Jackson, we need you to get back in the lineup for a couple of games. We need you to do your stuff. This is where Denver's really going to try and assert themselves. They understand how difficult it is in the top 4 right now in the West. Battling with Minnesota, battling with OKC. Even the Clippers being competitive is throwing a spanner in the works right now. But for Denver, they just need to get that home court advantage. They need to keep winning, and they need to have form going into the postseason. For me, still the favourites to come out of the West. Golden State, they're on a nice run. 8-2 on the week. 32-27 now in the season. So all of a sudden, they've gone from a team that struggled to get to 500 to 5 games clear of 500 and building. Defeated Phoenix, the Jazz twice, the Lakers, the Hornets, the Wizards, the Knicks, and the Raptors. Lost out to the Clippers and the Nuggets. Steph Curry, their best player over that period. Not ideal shooting splits at 41% from the field and 85% from the free throw line, which is crazy to think that I'm criticising a guy for shooting better than 85% from the free throw line. It's just not Curry standard. 39.4 from deep, he's getting up there as well. 3 turnovers, not great. But 25.3 points, 4.7 rebounds, 6.1 assists, 0.1 steals, and 0.2 blocks. As I mentioned, 3 turnovers there. Steph needs to continue to lead. Jonathan Kuminga needs to be a viable second option. Klay Thompson needs to take pride in representing the second unit. Draymond Green, just don't hit anyone, just don't say anything stupid. It's a lot easier said than done from my perspective, but ultimately that's all he's got to do, because he gets out there and he can run within that system, he can play well within that system. So for Golden State, they're pushing up towards that 8th seed there, and they will want to keep rolling. They will want to cause some issues. Not saying they're going to get out of the play-in tournament, not saying they're going to even get a win in the play-in tournament in general. But it is something that needs to be factored in, and that's the veteran experience. They're on a roll right now. Injuries aside, they're looking like an informed team heading into the postseason that just wants to ruffle a few feathers. I don't see them winning a championship, but certainly ruffle a few feathers. Houston, they're still crashing down to earth. 2-6 over the period. 9 games now below 500. Beat the Knicks and the Suns. Lost out to the Hawks, the Grizzlies, the Pelicans, the Suns in the return, and twice to the Thunder. Jalen Green, again, this is the issue Houston have had when their bad weeks have been absolutely terrible, and their leaders clearly wouldn't have hit water if they fell out of a boat. Jalen Green, 16.4 points, 5.9 rebounds, 4 assists, 0.9 steals, and 0.5 blocks. Less than 3 turnovers, but less than 35% from the field as well. So for Houston, they've had that nice little period there outside of maybe a month or 5 weeks where they were above 500. I think that's a really good litmus test, and I think right now this is a team that's going to try and run some structure, try and test a few things out, and look to go again next year. But from a Houston standpoint, this isn't a team that's been trailing the whole year. This is a team that showed plenty of promise. I can't fault a team that's got plenty of promise when I expected nothing out of it. Really super simple stuff right there. Moving on over, and we head to our friends, the Clippers. 4-4, 38-20. And some interesting thoughts on this one here. Defeated Detroit, Golden State, Memphis, and Washington, but lost to Minnesota, OKC, Sacramento, and Los Angeles. So when you're going to look at all these teams and they got wins against, great, awesome, you should. You played three of the five worst teams in the league. You then went up against two of the three best teams in the West, a genuine top six team and a genuine play-in team, and struggled to get anything of any impact there. So from a Clipper standpoint, they really have to just look at things and go, well, we need to assess this. I know it's only early and no one wants to factor it in, but it is something that needs to be concerning that, yeah, we might be 18 games above, yeah, we might be a 4 seed, but we need to be making sure that we're on top of our matchups, that we're on top of our defensive end, we're on top of our offensive schemes, because right now, I would not want to be a Clipper fan that's sitting there going, we're okay. Probably just a couple of reasons to be concerned. James Harden, their best player in this period, 19.3 points, 5.3 rebounds, 7 assists, 0.5 steals and 0.9 blocks a game, less than 3 turnovers, 45.3 from the field, 36.5 from deep, 91.8 from the free throw line. The Lakers, they've had a much better week in comparison, 5-2, defeated Detroit, Utah, the Spurs, the Clippers, and the Wizards, lost out to the Suns, and lost out to the Warriors. Anthony Davis just continuing to be an absolute menace, just continuing to prove why he's one of the leading Defensive Player of the Year candidates, and certainly continues at times to play at an MVP level. 27.7 points, 14 rebounds, 1.7 assists, 1 steal and 2.7 blocks, less than 2 turnovers, 58.9 from the field, 85.2 from the free throw line. I'd like to see a little bit more from deep. Ultimately for the Lakers, if they're going to be above 500 and they're going to compete, then, they can ruffle some feathers. I can't rule out a team that didn't look like anything last year and then rolled on in to, essentially a conference final. Now, they got swept, so you could argue they were a genuine second-round team. And you could certainly argue they took on a weaker version of what the Grizzlies were at that particular stage. But I can't sit there and just totally rule them out from nothing. Now, I don't think they're a championship team, but they're going to cause some issues in the playoffs if they get in. You've got a guy who scored more points in pro basketball history than anybody. You're also talking about a guy who has been going in and out of this purple patch of form since about 2017-18, where he goes from, geez, he might be the best player in the league, to, geez, why are they playing him? When's he getting his possessions in Anthony Davis? So the Lakers get everything clicking, the Lakers get everything moving, they're going to cause some issues. I don't think there's any question about that. Over to Memphis, 2-6 on the week, 20-40. They've done the reverse, defeated Houston and Milwaukee, lost out to Charlotte, New Orleans, the Clippers, the Nets, Minnesota, and lost out to Portland as well. Vincent Williams Jr., their best player over this period. They've seen some shining lights, and that's about the one thing that I can give Memphis right now. They might not have been playing great, they might not be executing, they're not getting the results on the board, but there's a lot of upside in the talent that they have if they're able to keep it, develop it, produce it, and really take it along for the ride, particularly when you get Brandon Clark back, when you get Desmond Bain back, when you get Ja Morant back. Victor Oladipo, he's unhealthy, but if you're going to get some veteran experience there with him and Derrick Rose, and it's weird to say Oladipo's a veteran, but if you're going to get that kind of exposure there with them, then this team becomes a lot better. They get a lot more experience. Ja gets back, some leadership back in the team. Really interesting to see what Memphis will look like next season. That's exactly where they're playing for. Minnesota, 42-18, 6-2 on the period there. Defeated Portland twice, as well as the Clippers, the Nets, the Spurs, and the Grizzlies. Lost out to the Bucks and the Kings. Anthony Edwards just continuing to be Anthony Edwards and showing why he's one of the best shooting guards, let alone one of the best guards in the league. 29.3 points, 5.4 rebounds, 4.5 assists, 1.5 steals and 0.8 blocks on 2 turnovers, just under 47% from the field, just over 30% from deep. So from the field, I can pass it. From deep, not so much. That's where you show where he's developing his floor game, and now he needs to develop his shooting. And 89.1 from the free throw line. Minnesota, they're going to be a top 2 team consistently in the West. The real question is, can they just slightly show some variations of what they can do? I just think they're a little bit predictable. I think they're consistent to a fault. And that fault simply being that it may not measure up in the postseason when other teams do change things up. But really, it's hard to sort of argue that they can't be a conference finalist when you've got a genuine leader who's a genuine All-NBA first-team candidate when you've got another guy who's a genuine second option and proven to be an all-star level player, another guy who's probably going to win his 4th Defensive Player of the Year award, and another guy who's a chance to win the 6th Man of the Year. This is a good roster. You got Mike Conley in there as well with some veteran experience. So plenty of pieces about, plenty of work that can be done. It's just a matter of whether they can execute, whether they can keep on top, whether they won't burn out. If they can just show some variation, then they're going to be a real pain in the neck and a real question that needs to be answered in the postseason. Over to New Orleans, they're 6-3 on the week, and they're now 11 games above 500, 36-25. They're a genuine top 6 team when they are on song. Defeated Portland, Memphis, Washington, Houston, New York, and Indiana. Lost out to the Heat, the Bulls, and the Pacers. Trey Murphy, the third, he played in all of their games over this period and had a nice little role as well. 15.3 points, 5.6 rebounds, 2.4 assists, 1.6 steals, and 1.1 blocks. Less than half a turnover a game. 0.1 turnover. He's had 1 turnover essentially in that 9-game period. Now I can excuse that. I can accept that, particularly when you look at his shooting. It hasn't been great. 42.6 from the field, 74.2 from the line. If you're not turning the ball over at all, you've turned it over once in 9 games, and you bring that up that side of the production. You add in the fact that you're playing with Brandon Ingram, Jonas Valanciunas, Zion Williamson, CJ McCollum. That's a really nice mix there for New Orleans, particularly for Trey Murphy. A guy who's just continued to push through, really play a pinch-hitting role, doesn't get a lot of respect around the league, but he's a key rotational player. And I'm telling you now, if Trey Murphy rocks up to your team in a trade deal, depending on who you traded out, of course, but if he's going to rock up in a trade deal, be very happy and be very pleased with that there. New Orleans with a really nice piece. A team that genuinely can be top 6 here in this conference. You could see Sacramento, you could see Dallas, you could see the Lakers, and you could see the Warriors all playing in a play-in tournament, while New Orleans and Phoenix finish out those final 2 spots. And that's exactly what they're going to be aiming for. That's what they should be aiming for. That's a genuine, realistic goal for the Pelicans, who have had a nice bounce-back year after a couple of turbulent seasons. For the Thunder, they just keep rolling. 41-18, 6-2 on the week. Defeated the Kings, the Magic, the Clippers, the Wizards, and twice beat the Rockets. Lost out to Dallas and San Antonio. Shai Gilgeous-Alexander just continues to show why he's the MVP for me of this league. 31.8 points, 5.3 rebounds, 5.9 assists, 1.3 steals, 1.1 blocks, less than 2 turnovers a game. Great shooting splits, 55.4 from the field, 62.5 from deep, and 82.8 from the free throw line. Another side, the question is, have they peaked early? Are they too young? I'd rather them peak early. I'd rather them know their capabilities and see if they can make a run, especially with the amount of draft stocks they've got, the wiggle room they may have to try and bring guys in. Interesting times ahead. Paul George might be a guy who they look at as well. Indiana, OKC, the ultimate 2 spots right now, you would think, for Paul George. But OKC, they're just rolling. They've got the MVP of the league. They've got a guy who has a genuine most improved case, a guy with a genuine 6th Man of the Year case, a guy with a genuine Rookie of the Year case. Nice team. Really looking to get things done, really trying to make a run, get a position, and really show the league who's who. Phoenix 4-3 over this period, 35-24 on the season. Defeated Sacramento, Detroit, Los Angeles, the Lakers that is, and the Rockets. They lost their return game to the Rockets. Also lost to Dallas and Golden State. But Devin Booker just continuing to still be that key piece. 25.7 points, 4 rebounds, 5.4 assists, 1.3 steals, and 0.4 blocks. Less than 3 turnovers a game. Actually, just a smidgen over 2 a game. 45.9 from the field, 32.4 from deep, and 92% from the free throw line. For Phoenix, it's just a matter of keeping healthy, keeping fit, the continuity in their lineups, because Nurkic has been huge, as well as Beal and Devin Booker and Kevin Durant. I just feel, again, this team runs better as a unit with Devin Booker. You know, he's now the 2nd all-time leading scorer for the Suns. I think he's one of the 3 greatest Suns of all time. You're talking Amari, Steve Nash, Charles Barkley level territory, your Tom Chambers, your Paul Westphal, your Connie Hawkins, your Larry Nances. They're the kind of people that you're competing with there, your Kevin Johnsons, your Dan Marleys. You know, he's certainly comfortably in amongst those guys right now. We're talking about a guy who led a team to the finals, to a franchise record in wins, to an All-NBA season. Now all of a sudden he's happily taken a 2nd step back, at times taking a 3rd, 4th step back, becoming more of a facilitator, really helping the Suns. And I think it's that dynamic of that combination between Beal, between Durant, and between Booker that makes them a really dangerous prospect heading into the postseason. genuine 5th seed right now, so all of a sudden you'd see the Clippers and the Suns again in the first round. Of course, the Clippers would be looking for some revenge, particularly when you factor in the injuries of last year. For the Suns, they've bolstered up again. That would be an absolute mouth-watering playoff proposition, that's for sure. Portland, 1-6 on the week, 16-42 on the year. It's crazy to think they have a better record than Charlotte. It's not something I've ever considered, because I actually feel, number one, that they're a better team, but number two, I don't feel they've played better than Charlotte. I feel they're a better team. I think if you put them two squads on paper, that you take the Portland roster. But with what's been produced and the injuries, very hard to say otherwise. Defeated Memphis, lost out to New Orleans, twice to Minnesota, as well as Denver, Charlotte, and Miami. Jeremy Grant, their best player, 18.6 points, 3 rebounds, 4 assists. I think everyone knows the fact that I backed Jeremy Grant in as a player, 1.3 steals and 0.1 blocks, less than 3 turnovers. But when you're shooting 39.5 from deep and 39.3 from the field, you're better off just staying behind the 3-point line and lobbing them up, 77.8 from the free throw line. That's just how Portland sit right now. They're a team that's looking to next year. Not much else needs to be said. Sacramento, 4-4 over this period, 34-25 on the season. Defeated Denver, the Spurs, the Clippers, and Minnesota, but they lost their return game against Denver. Also lost out to the Thunder, the Suns, and the Heat. Sabonis with a 8-game triple-double average here, with some crazy efficiency as well. 20.4 points, 13.4 rebounds, 10.1 assists, 1.1 steals, and 0.9 blocks. Less than 3 turnovers a game, 56.7 from the field, 33.3 from deep, 66.7 from the free throw line. Ultimately here for Sacramento, it's trying to get into that top 6. Can they compete with New Orleans? Can they compete with Phoenix? Can they stave off Dallas? Because you then get an absolute tantalizing matchup when you look at it in that opening round right now. Sacramento and Dallas in a one-off game to try and determine the 7th seed. Really interesting stuff. On the other side of it, if you see a loss there and then you play either Golden State or the Lakers, another tantalizing matchup. So from a fan standpoint, Sacramento in a really exciting position. From a Sacramento standpoint, in a really dangerous and vulnerable position. This is what needs to motivate them as players. This is what needs to keep getting Malik Monk to get some solid minutes. This is where De'Aaron Fox needs to keep buying in, whether he's going to be there next year. This is also where they need to believe in the leadership of Sabonis to try and get something done. Huge run coming up here for Sacramento in the next few weeks. Spurs, only one guy I'm going to talk about here. They're 2-6. They're 12-48. They're one of the worst teams in the league. Defeated Toronto and Oklahoma City. Lost out to Brooklyn, Dallas, Sacramento, the Lakers, Utah, and Minnesota. But the best rookie in 25 years is currently in the league. The best rookie since Tim Duncan is currently in the league, and he's everything that's promised, and potentially could be even more. 23.4 points, 10.8 rebounds, 4.9 assists over this period, as well as 2.3 steals and 4.8 blocks, including multiple 5-block nights, and the only other guy, not named Michael Jordan, to have 5 steals and 5 blocks in back-to-back games. 3.4 turnovers, don't worry about it with what he's doing on both ends of the floor. We're talking 48.1 from the field, that'll only get better, but we're talking 40.4 from deep and 84% from the free throw line. I've said this before and I've said it again. You'll know it when you see it. And I'm not saying that I know what I'm seeing, but I think we're looking at it. That is the ceiling I will put on Victor Wembanyama. You know it when you see it? Well, I like what I'm looking at. Scary prospect right now for the Spurs. Scary prospect for the league. They're already talking about adjusting defensive rules because of the All-Star break. I think a factor in it is that everyone is so intrigued with Wembanyama and Chet. Look at what these guys are doing. At 7'2", at 7'4". The league's like, we know where our cash cow is. We know who's coming down the pipeline. Yeah, we're talking Mount Rushmore level talent here for Wembanyama. And we're talking the best rookie season since Tim Duncan, who played for the Spurs. Just a ridiculous year so far. Finally, Utah, 1-6 on the period there, 27-33. They've gone from a genuine 500 team. They've just started to slump a little bit. Colin Sexton's been their best player over this period, 20.9 points, 2.4 rebounds, 5.6 assists, 1.6 steals and 0.4 blocks, 2.4 turnovers with that. Nice shooting splits as well, 50 from the field, 50 from deep, just under 80% from the free throw line. Defeated the Spurs, lost to Golden State, the Lakers, Charlotte, Atlanta and Orlando, and I think when you're really going to look at it from there, it probably is about where Utah are at. They're not getting the job done against competitors for the play-in tournament on either side of the conference, all fringe top 6 teams. Still a little bit of work to do for Utah, but I am liking the production that you get. You can see Colin Sexton can play, you can see Lauri Markkanen can play, you can see Jordan Clarkson can play. They just need that piece. They also need Walker Kessler to be, getting back into the lineup as well. Really interesting to see. I forgot to touch on it way back with the Clippers as well. Russell Westbrook, broken hand. That's going to hurt their rotations as well. So it's going to be an interesting time out in the West right now. We'll go to the top 10 when you look at it, and it is an absolute logjam. And again, we talk about the fight between 4 and 8 in the East. Well, the battle 5 through 8 is going to be interesting in the West. Timberwolves, Thunder, Nuggets, I think you're going to see them consistently as that top 3. You would think the Clippers hold on to 4, but the Suns might battle them. But the Suns, the Pelicans, the Kings, and the Mavs, really interesting times 5 through 8. Because any of those 4 teams can be those last 2 teams, and it becomes a real tantalising matchup when you put them out on the floor against the Warriors or the Lakers if they're in form. Just some really scary stuff over in the West. Some interesting matchups. Certainly more interesting with the play-in tournament implications here in the West compared to the East, because of how the Warriors can play, because of how the Lakers can play. But at the same time, it's a matter of health for those guys. It's a matter of consistency with those guys. For Dallas, can they get their defense right? For the Kings, can they keep getting that buy-in? For the Pelicans, is that shared responsibility going to work? For the Suns, can their chemistry hold up? For the Clippers, how do they play through injury? So it becomes interesting over in the West. I'm really, really, really fascinated just with how that one will pan out. My best player over the period there, led their team to the best record over the period there from Feb 10th to the start of March. Steph Curry, again, just showing why he is the talent. And the conversation is, they were talking about trades, or they were talking about bringing players in, which I totally get and understand. Because your other option there for Golden State is you either burn the building down and you totally remove what happens there in the way of Steph Curry, you just remove him out, or you make that shuffle and you tell guys this is how you're going to have to buy in if we're going to get the job done. And that's currently where they're sitting right now. You've got to let Steph lead. It's Steph's right to lead. As much as people, they've got to give it up, they've got to stop doing things. I agree. There are levels where guys just need to give it up. But Steph's done way too much for that franchise. The greatest player in franchise history. He's done way, way too much to just give that up. And vice versa, the franchise needs to repay him and keep buying into that system. They've extended Steve Kerr. What moves do they have in the postseason? The Warriors are going to be a really interesting team, not only with the implications to the end of the season and the playoff, with the playoffs and the play-in tournament, but the off-season as well. And it is all based around Steph Curry. There's no doubt about that. Anyway, guys, that has been my wrap to the 1st of March 2024. Business starting to pick up here in the NBA. Who will fall by the wayside? Who will capitalise on an opportunity? It remains to be seen. Anyway, guys, that's been me. I'm out.